Alright, how's it going, y'all? So today, we're going to be going over how to set up a Synology NAS for a family. And this is really going to be on the basics. We're going to be focusing on two of their best apps that really make it very easy. Synology Photos for photos and Synology Drive for files. We're going to be using these two to basically have an entire family setup where everybody's computer can be backed up to the NAS, even if they're away at college or anything like that. And their phone's photos are also backed up. And you can create basically what is a giant family photo album for all of your family to see. It's actually what I've got set up for my entire family. Everybody's got access to it. We've got photos going back to my grandmother's photos. And so we've got this massive photo repository that everybody has access to on their phones, and it's all shared. And to do this, you can use pretty much any Synology NAS, ideally one with BTRFS installed. And we're going to be going under the assumption that pretty much nothing has been set up just yet. So it's a completely blank slate, and we're pretty much going to be going from there. We're really going to be focusing on this for pretty much beginners. We're just looking to get everybody's files centralized, and then there is so much more you can do from there, but we're going to really start with the basics here. But I always try to remind everybody, make sure to have a backup of your NAS, just because we're not going to cover that in this video, but especially if you're going to start using the NAS as your primary file storage, you need to make sure you have a backup of it. All right, so to start, go ahead and log into DSM and log in with an account that has admin privileges. So that's probably the very first account you created. And first off, we're going to go ahead and create a new group. That's going to be under Control Panel, Users and Group. And I always just like to make a family group. Basically, we're going to create a group for everybody in the family. And this way, as you add people, all you do is you just add them to this group, and you don't have to mess with any other permissions. It makes it a lot easier, especially when you're dealing with Synology Photos. We'll add myself, and you can go ahead and add in any other family users you've already created. But next up, we're going to go ahead and create those users. We don't have any folders set up just yet, so we're just going to skip all through this. And now we are going to go ahead and just create our additional users. And so when you create them, all you've got to do is give them a username and a password. So people are often confused and think that the email is their username. Whatever you type here is their username, and that's what they're going to use to log into everything. I would recommend keeping everything simple with just first names if you can stand it, as it just makes everything a lot easier. Then the only thing we're going to do here is add them to this family group. And we're not going to mess with any other permissions unless you need to. So you can go ahead and just click through the rest of these and then do that n number of times for any other people in the family you would like to access. The way we're going to be setting this up is anybody in that group has access to the entire family photo repository, which is going to be set up later on here. All right, so now that we've got our users, the next thing we need to go ahead and do is give everybody their own folder. We want everybody to have their own little section of NAS. That's where their photos will go. That's where their backups will go. Basically, their own folder that only they have access to, and you as the administrator. That way it doesn't clutter up anything, and people can back up their phone photos and not worry about everything getting cluttered up, and just have their own little sections. And it's probably already been enabled on your system, at least for a lot of people. But if not, we're going to go into Advanced. And at the very bottom there is enable the user home service. So this is something that's really important to understand and confuses a lot of new users. Once we enable this, we are going to see two new folders in File Station, Home and Homes. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we can see we've got Home and Homes. If you look in our Homes folder, we see every single one of our users listed out here, that user Katie we just created. And that is how the Homes folder works. Really, this Home folder right here is a virtual folder inside of this Homes folder right here. So I am currently signed in with the user Will. If we look in Will's Home folder, we can see that this and this are the exact same folder. So what happens is, because we are the administrator, because we've got full access to everything on NAS, we can see the home folders of every other user, but everyone else will only see their home folder. So if Katie were to log in, she would only see her home folder, and it would be this folder right here. It's really confusing for new users because you see this home and homes and you think you're duplicating space. So my general advice is never touch anything in the homes folder unless you're going to be adding files to somebody else's home folder, but never just add folders right here as it can cause a lot of issues. Then the other thing we're going to go ahead and do before we go too much further is I always just hide it from the local network just because it confuses people and it's easier that way. So by doing that, all I did right here is said, hey, don't show up in Windows File Explorer and stuff, even though most people would not have permission to it. It's still just easier to hide it away entirely. So this home folder is going to be where our Synology Photos personal space goes and our Synology Drive My Drive goes. So anything personal or my is going to be in that home folder. Basically, it's going to depend on the user who is logged in. Now, we're also going to go ahead and create an additional folder, and I always like to call it the family folder. And that is going to be under Control Panel, Shared Folder, Create. So I like to have a folder that everybody has access to in the family. So it's just easy to add family documents, anything everybody might need access to easily. And then permission-wise, we're going to say that anybody in the group family has read-write to it by default. So it's just an easy way of giving people that permission. All right, so now we have this family folder that we're going to use for just general family files, and everybody's going to have their own little home folder where they can put their phone backups, their computer backups, just files that only they need access to, all in that home folder. At this level, it's called the homes folder because remember, there's really just one big ol' homes folder and then a bunch of folders called home within there depending on who is logged in. Now we are going to add in one additional folder, and that is going to be for that family photo album. And that is going to be an entirely separate folder called Photo, used and created by Synology Photos. And if you don't plan on using Synology Photos, you can skip over this section, but I want to do this right now off the beginning because we want to have all of our folders created before we go to the next steps. So this is where you kind of just need to follow me on this one because there's a lot of very specific steps to make this work very easily, and otherwise it can get complex. So that is why we've made sure to have the family group and other things like that. Just make this easier. You're just going to have to trust me on this. This is the fastest and easiest path to get this set up. So first off, if you've not already, go ahead and install Synology Photos. All right, so now that Synology Photos has downloaded and installed, we need to go ahead and enable what's called the shared space here, and that's going to be that root shared folder called Photo. So to do that, we're going to hit Open, click through this, go into Settings, Shared Space, Enable Shared Space. This is going to go ahead and create that shared photo folder. So now there's going to be an additional folder here called Photo. And we want to give everybody in that family group access to it. We need to go into our users and group family, and we need to give everyone in the family group access to it. So we need to allow them to use the Photo app. And we do that by double-clicking on Family, clicking Applications, scrolling down to Synology Photos, and hitting Allow. Now everyone in family has access to Synology Photos, and we can come back and now give them access to the shared space. So if we didn't already give them access to Synology Photos, we would not be able to do this. So we're going to come in, hit Set Access Permissions, and allow everyone in family full access to the shared space. And if you want, we can go ahead and enable facial and subject recognition in the shared space. So we had to follow those specific steps there, mostly just that is the easiest way to get this set up because of how the permissions work and everything. But now what we have is everybody who is in that family group that we've set up will automatically have access to Synology Photos and the shared space, which is going to be our family photo album. So now we're going to be able to switch between them. So that is all we have to do right now for Synology Photos. I'm going to come back to it in the second part of this video. We just needed to set it up right now to make sure we had all of our permissions and to create that share. So that way when we do our snapshots and everything, it's already set up. Okay, so that's it for Photos for now. And we are all set up. We can see now we have 3 different shared folders. One for family, one for photo, and then essentially our personal home folder that every single person gets. We'll also see now that we've installed Synology Photos, we can see there is a folder called Photos in our folder. That's because that is where our personal space is, but that's going to be in the second part of this video. Now, before we do anything, we want to make sure that we've got Snapshots set up. I'm going to run through this really quickly. Snapshots are going to be that undo button for whenever somebody screws something up. I've got a ton of more content on it. It's a phenomenal feature that everybody really needs, but I'm just going to go ahead and install Snapshot Replication and set up a very basic snapshot on these shares. Don't forget to do this. It is one of the things where somebody accidentally got a virus on their computer or deleted the wrong file. It goes from being a 2-second undo to a big issue, even if you have backups. So just install Snapshot Replication, come into Snapshots. We're going to do this on all of our shares and come into Settings, Snapshot Schedule, every hour, retention, 14 days, and 30 days. I've got a ton more content on this, but we want to breeze over it and just get it set up here. What I just ran through are my super quick basic settings there just to get it set up and just easy defaults for most people. So that way, if somebody in the family deletes the wrong file or honestly does anything, we've got 30 days where we can undo it. Always remember to set this up every time you create a new shared folder. And finally, the way we are going to be accessing these files is going to be simple. We're going to be using Quickconnect. If you've already got a different way of external access, go ahead and use that here, but we're going to keep it super simple and just enable Quickconnect. That's going to be under external access and enable Quickconnect. By default, this will only use a relay server, but if you want to, you can open up ports and you can do a whole bunch of other stuff there. But for now, for the basics here, we're going to go ahead and enable Quickconnect. There are security implications to this, FYI, because now the NAS is accessible from the internet. It is just through a relay server to start, so it's still pretty secure, but just know whenever you're enabling Quickconnect, there is now a component of external access on this NAS, and that is what we're going to be using to log into everything. So come up with a Quickconnect ID here. This one's going to be DS1522 demo, and it has to be globally unique. And this is pretty much what everybody's going to plug into their applications to connect on in. If you want to be a little bit extra secure and only use this for apps, you can actually click on this and disable this for DSM access and only use it for apps. All right, so now we're pretty much done a control panel. The only last option we have is when we did create that photo folder, we can choose whether or not we'd like people to be able to just see it on their mobile apps, so just through Synology Photos or on the web browser of Synology Photos, or also be able to interact with it from a file perspective. So if you want to kind of just restrict people to only being able to add files through Synology Photos to make sure nobody accidentally deletes anything, you can do that. Or if you want people to be able to connect to it via like Windows, File Explorer, macOS Finder, we can give that same family group access to it through permissions, local groups, and family. So this is where we can choose whether or not we want the family group to have the ability to read and write directly to the photo folder, but that's going to be in the second part of this. But we've got our 3 shares set up. Homes is not really a share because it's really just a bunch of home folders that we as the administrator can see. Then we've got the family, which we're going to be using for files, and photo, which we're going to be using for family photos. And we've got snapshots set up on all of these. Finally, we're using our Quickconnect ID right here to be able to access the NAS from our mobile apps remotely. And so this is what you're going to need to give every one of your users, the Quickconnect ID, as well as their username and password. All right, so now that is step 1 complete. control panel is done. We have all of our settings exactly as we want them to get this set on up. Step 2 is now going to be setting up Synology Drive, and Synology Drive is going to be set up for files. So we're going to be using this for computer backups, as well as just a kind of iCloud or OneDrive setup for everyone in the family. You've got mobile apps where you can access them on your phone, you can access them on the web browser, or also download an app called Synology Drive on your computers that allow you to sync files just like you can with iCloud Drive or OneDrive. And if you've not already, go into Package Center and just type Drive and install Synology Drive Server. When you do that, 3 different apps will be installed here. Synology Drive, which is used to actually see all of our files on the web interface. Much like Google Drive or Dropbox, you get that same interface. Synology Drive Share Sync to sync with another Synology. That's out of the scope of this video. And Synology Drive Admin Console to control all of our settings. And we'll jump right into that first. So the primary place where you're going to be accessing and really doing settings here is under Team Folders. Right now, if I were to open up Synology Drive, I would not see any team folders. I would only see my drive. That's because even though we've got shared folders, they're not going to show up in team folders because they've not been enabled in Synology Drive. So what we can do is click on it, go into team folder, and for most people, I would say family and photo, select both of those and hit enable. For version control, I'm going to go ahead and disable it here because we've got those snapshots and it can take up some performance. But now what's going to happen is all the files in these folders are going to be indexed by Synology Drive. And if you've got a ton of files in there, this can take a while and that's totally normal. But what it's doing is it's indexing it so you can search for file names or even like photo names and photo exposure times. It also sets it up so these files can be synced to a computer across the network. After that, if I go ahead and refresh, we'll see that those now show up in my team folder section. So what we've got now is we've got the My Drive, which is personal to me. So I'm signed in with Will, so this is Will's drive. If Katie were to sign in, Katie would not see these files. Katie would see her own files in her own home folder. And then the team folder is where the group files are. So family. This is where everybody can add their own files that everybody in the family needs access to. And then photo, this is going to be just for family photos. Any photos in here will be indexed and shown in the shared space in the next section. But this is the web interface, and this is where we can do the basic stuff. But more likely than not, you don't want everybody just uploading and downloading files from a web browser. Really what you want is for this to be plugged into people's phones and computers. So phones are very easy. On your phone, whatever app store you've got, go to search Synology Drive. Icon should look pretty much like that. And it's going to ask you those 3 questions. Quickconnect ID, username, password. For Quickconnect ID, that is what we set up here. And username and password is the username and password for each individual user. And that is very easy. You'll see them exactly as you would on a mobile app. You can see all these files, pretty much the same view here. You can even use it to sync files and have stuff downloaded on your phone automatically. Now for a computer, it's a bit more complex. We can go ahead and download the desktop app here. This is the easiest place to find it, just hit for desktop. But if needed, the way you find this download is to come in, go to the bottom, go into downloads, type in any NAS model here, it's annoying, and download Synology Drive client, and then just install it as you would anything else. So once you've downloaded and installed it on each person's computer, you should get brought to a screen that looks like this. You probably won't see the top half. This is just because I'm still using it on this computer for my own NAS. But it'll probably say connect to Synology, and it's going to ask you those 3 questions from before. Just go ahead and type in your Quickconnect ID, username, and password. And this is where we can go ahead and set up a sync task. So right here, we can go ahead and basically have our folder our personal space show up on our computer. We're going to enable that on-demand sync. That is where the files look like they're on your computer, but they're not actually taking up space until you double click on them to open them, and they're downloaded in the background. Same way that iCloud Drive works, and OneDrive and Dropbox and pretty much everything. We're going to enable it on Mac and Windows. It's slightly different. On Windows, you have to choose what folder you want. On Mac, it just does it automatically. And we're going to go ahead and say, call it Synology Drive-Personal. And now what will happen is in Finder, we will see those cloud icons just like that, where essentially the files are only downloaded when you open them and you manually say, hey, I want access to that. But we can pretty much create folders and do everything like this and just copy files there, and it's going to work wherever we are in the world. That's the nice thing about Quickconnect, is it does it all automatically for us. So this is where every single person in the family has their own little cloud where they can store files. They can also come in and create a new backup task where they can choose a folder they want to back up and put it in their home folder. So that is the options. This is where it becomes very easy to back up a person's computer remotely, and really those are the two things we're going to use Synology Drive for: backups and syncs. Now we can also go ahead and say we also want them to have access to that family folder wherever they are in the world. We can also create an additional sync job for that family folder and continuously do this for as many as you would like, and they'll all just show up on the sidebar right here. Once again, slightly different between Mac and Windows, but they pretty much have the same settings and they work very simply. As long as Synology Drive is up here running, it pretty much is just going to work. And this is where we can see those sync jobs. So that is Synology Drive. The mobile app is pretty self-explanatory. It just works as you expect it to. And now family members can not only back up their computer files, whatever they like backed up, but they can also sync files and have their own little cloud storage where they've got access to their own files, as well as access to those family files. And obviously you can do more and more if you want them to have photos in that access on their computer, really whatever you'd like. But to keep this video short, we're going to end that part there. So that is Synology Drive done. For part 3, we're going to go on to Photos. And this is where it's really focused on an app called Synology Photos Mobile. And in the previous settings, we've already really got this thing set up and ready to go. We're going to go ahead and download an app called Synology Photos on our phone and use the same Quickconnect ID, username, password as in the previous step. And that is how everybody's going to hook up. Remember, make sure to use each person's username and password on their phone. That way their backups don't get messed up with anybody else. And I'm going to leave a link down in the description below to using Synology Photos for the backup stuff, just because there's a lot of specific settings on the phone that I show on that, and not much has changed in that aspect, and I explained it better there. What I am going to show here is how to really set this thing up for families and how I really like to set it up. So, as you can see, we have 2 different places where we can store our photos. Under Home, we see this Photos folder. This Photos folder is our personal space. If we open up Synology Photos, we'll see that that is listed out as personal space right here. And then we also see on the sidebar here this Photo folder. Synology Photos is going to call that the shared space. This is a very common point of confusion for people, but once you understand it, it's pretty simple. Think of your personal space as personal. Really, it's just you. Whoever's logged in, it is their personal space. So if you have 12 users and user number 3 logs in, they're only going to see user number 3's personal space. But the shared space is shared amongst everybody. That is that group photo album, essentially. That is that group repository of photos. Generally, the way I like to set these things up is your shared space are family photos. So if you're a photographer and you want to export out a Lightroom, always put them in the shared space. I personally set up mine by event type, year, and then event. So if I had a family gathering this year, it would be under a folder called Family, then down to 2025, then down to the date and the thing. So family, New Year's party, whatever. That's how I would do it. And this is where you've got two different ways to manage these files. We can either do it through this interface right here, or by actually joining it through either Synology Drive or connecting it with a mapped network drive. I'll leave a link down in the description below to my video about the difference between those two. But we can go ahead and just copy all of our family photos to this photo folder. The easiest place to do it probably is to connect via SMB right here. And then just go into your family photos and just copy them from there to here. Now, any photos that end up in there are going to be indexed by Synology Photos. And so this is the really useful thing. You copy all of your photos into this photo folder that you want everyone to have access to. And then if you go into Synology Photos and refresh your shared space, you can see right here that they just show up right there. It's very easy to add all of these photos in, and it'll do facial recognition and object recognition all locally on device. And you also have a very nice timeline. You can switch between the timeline and the actual folder view. So you really have the best of both worlds there. I'm really going to put most of the coverage on this in my dedicated video on Synology Photos, as there's just so much you can do. So the important thing is, when you're setting this up, you put everybody's phone backups to their personal space. Then you keep those family photos that you want everybody to have access to in your shared space. And that way, you essentially build up an awesome family repository of all family events for years to come. And the really nice part about this system is, say 10 years down the line, you think there's a better option out there. The really nice way that Synology Photos works is, it doesn't have a proprietary database that moves all your photos around and modifies the metadata and has a kludgy process to get your photos out like Google Photo does, but rather, they're just files. So if you want to move them to a new system, all you have to do is just copy them from this folder into whatever new system you like. And that is why I really like it, because it is the simplest unit. It is just a folder structure that you control, and then Synology Drive works on top of that to index it and figure out how to show it in a timeline view. Finally, you can also play around with albums and create different albums to share amongst different family members, out of things, and there's just tons and tons of options to do. But as long as you follow the steps, where you've gone ahead and you've created that family group that has access to Synology Photos, and given them shared space permissions, then it's going to be very easy to add additional family members. That is the number one thing that trips people up and makes it very complicated. As long as you've got it set up like that, it becomes very easy to really have this great family repository. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and end it there. There's so much more stuff you can do with these things, but I wanna keep it as a basic intro for people setting up a NAS for the first time for their family members. And these are really the two most powerful applications to get started with that and just really create your own personal cloud. If you want to hire me, there's a link for that down in the description below. And if you have any other questions, put those down in the comments below. And have a good one. Bye.